Good evening, friends. Yesterday I started with the history of English literature, but unfortunately, because of certain unavoidable circumstances, I could not finish the video, and I was forced by the circumstances to cut short the video. Today, I'm going to start from the same topic, and I'll try my level best to finish this topic today and to discuss each and every detail which is necessary and important from each and every examinations point of view. Mostly this is the first period of English literature, or this is the period where our literature sprouts out and the foundation of our literature were laid. One request that I would like to make here, please subscribe my channel so that you may be able to get the notification of new videos, and keep on giving your suggestions so that I may be able to improve the quality of the content and quality of the medium as well. So without wasting our time, let's start with the topic, that is Anglo-Saxon or Old English period. So as you are quite familiar with this topic, that this is the very first period of English literature, and the period begins around 450 and it lasts till 1050, or in some books it is 1066. Why 450 is the beginning of the Anglo-Saxon period? Because this is the time around that these Germanic tribes crossed over the sea and entered on the British Isles. So in yesterday's video we discussed chronology of significant events, because it is around 449 AD when a tribe of Germanic tribes, Angles, Saxons and Jutes, appeared on the English soil, and the first poem, or the maiden poem, that was written in our literature is Beowulf, which was written, it is conjectured rather, the date is not exact, it is conjectured that it was written around 700 to 1000 AD. The most important thing to remember about this poem is the poem is anonymous in nature. Anonymous is a term which is used in literature for a piece of writing whose authorship is unknown. It is around 860 AD when Anglo-Saxon Chronicle, a book which reckons the history and the historical events of the English history, was started. And 1049 is the period when Westminster Abbey, which is the most famous and renowned graveyard of the England, it was started. 878 AD, this is the time when the Treaty of Wedmore was signed, and this treaty made Alfred the king of Wessex. How the period started, let's discuss it. A deluge of invaders known as Celts, we can also pronounce it Celts, arrived on the shores of England around 500 BC, and those Celts were made up of numerous tribes. Earliest were Gaels. Nowadays, Gaels is a term which is used for Scotland. We say that Gaelic literature, which is also another name for the Scottish literature. Those Gaels invaded the western and the northern parts of the Britain. The Britain, this is also a tribe or a clan, arrived next to these Celts and occupied maximum area of Britain, and the country was named after this tribe, because Britain is a name which was nomenclatured to the land of Britons. Britons is the name of a tribe who entered on the land and inhabited there. So what is the origin of the tribes? Let us discuss briefly about it. Before Anglo-Saxons The aboriginal inhabitants of the Britain were Celts. Before the arrival of the Anglo-Saxon people, because as I discussed a while ago, that before the invasion of the Anglo-Saxon around 449, the aboriginal people of the Britain were Britons. Uh, they were invaded by the Romans, by the Roman king Claudius in 44 AD. Because Rome or the Roman Empire was the most dominant and the most powerful and impregnable power of that time, and the land of the Britain was very fertile and very rich in resources, but unfortunately those resources remained unexplored because of the barbaric nature, because of the barbaric nature and the chaotic situation that always remained there on the land. So those people, those Celts were fed up with the maltreatments of the Romans, because Romans were the invaders, because they used to rule a very large area of this planet, because they were really very robust people, and it was quite impossible to defeat them in the warfare. So they were invaders, and they brought culture to the Britain, and they brought refined culture and their traditions and their language, but the treatment of subjugated and subjugator remained prevailed there, as we have in the recent past, colonized and the colonizer, because they were the conqueror, and they made their culture prevail there, and the dominance of their culture can be seen unequivocally and invariably there. This resented the reign and necessitated the invitation of the Anglo-Saxon and Jutes to get them good riddance, because of the maltreatment of the Roman, because they consider the people, Aboriginal people of the Britain, as savage people, people without culture, people without morality, people without knowledge, people without any sort of refinement or the cultural refinement, and that is why they consider them their subservients, and this sort of maltreatment turned unbearable to the Romans, to the Aboriginal people of the Britain, and they invited these Anglo-Saxon people to come and get them good riddance from this tribe and from the atrocities and the carnages and exploitative nature of this of the Romans. Latin, as I told you, that the culture and the language of the dominant Romans was always there. Latin was their native tongue before the arrival of the Anglo-Saxon, because Latin came on the British Isles with the arrival of Romans, and these three tribes, Angles, Saxons, and Jutes, migrated from Germania to Britain in 5th century to colonize distant Britain. These three were Germanic tribes. Germanic basically it was a tone there from where these people came, and that is why they were called so. And in the 5th century, it was around 5th century, 449 is the exact date that historians have jotted down in the various histories, when they crossed the North Sea and entered on the British Isles, and they started colonizing it. They were very adventurous people, and Anglo-Saxon denotes two tribes. Yes, this is the very important point to remember, or to note down in your notebooks. That is, the word angle means hook, and Saxon means a short sword or dagger. The most probably belong to the warrior class, because these were the people who belonged to the warrior class, and that is why these names clung to them. That is, angel mean hook or the hook man. the word is in the recent time. Walton used this term angle for fisherman, and the Saxon for a short sword, and the name denotes that those people were very belonging to the warrior class, and they believed in warfare and conquering, and then to get freedom, and then to achieve the liberty and freedom. It is also conjectured that fishing was their prime aim, as I told you just a while ago, and their prime business was also fishing. That is why name is still used for them. And jutes were from jute land, hence they were called jutes. So one thing that we got from this discussion, that Anglo Saxons and Jutes, basically these were three Germanic tribes. They were invited by the Breton people because they could not endure the atrocities and the carnages and the maltreatment and maltreatment of the Roman people, and they invited them because Britons were no more capable to throw them out. That is why they invited them, and these tribes were named after the particular area they belonged to. Angels were the most dominant and exorbitant in number. All these tribes crossed the North Sea with a common agenda to conquer the resourceful Britain and rule them. The basic motive of their invasion was to colonize the area, to exploit the resources, to enjoy the resources of the very fertile land, and then to get back. Basically, their motive was not to rule the land for a long time. Now let us discuss the nomenclature of the England. I told you that it was because of the Aboriginals Britons, which is name of a tribe, that the country was named that the country was known Britain. And now let us try to understand why this country, or how this country got the name England. A vast majority of invaders belonged to Angles, and Britain was named after the conquerors. Basically, Angles was those three tribes, three Germanic tribes who invaded the Britain. Angel was the most dominant people, and that is why a vast area of the Britain was occupied by these people, and obviously the majority of the people were belonging to this race, and that is why the country was named after them. At the outset, the country was known as England. Remember this, England, which is land of Angles. But with a petty change, the land was called England. Later on, this is the transformation with the passage of the time. Earlier, it was called England, land of the angels, and later on, it was called England, and finally, it was called England, land of those people, those angels, sorry. The land of Angles, are the land conquered by the Angles. This is how Britain was named England. So we got an idea how Britain was named, and then how Britain was named into England. Let us discuss about the major writers of the age, because our concern is with the writers. Now what you have to remember from this lecture is how Britain was named, and when was Westminster Abbey started, and what is Treaty of Wedmore, what is who are the most important and significant writers, are the canonical writers of the age. And now let us discuss major writers of the age. William Bede. Some people call it Bede, some people called it Bede. Uh, uh, the biographical details, the biographical information is very scanty, but he is regarded as our first scholar, and he is rightly called father of English learning. Bulk of his work was written in Latin. It is believed he translated Gospel into native uh, language, but unfortunately lost. The most important and the significant work of this era was Ecclesiastical History of English People. This work is the only extant work we have. Remember it. Extant. Extant mean the work which has arrived to us, and in other word is extent. Extent, that stands for boundary, that stands for limit. We have to distinguish this word from that word. This is believed to be first history of England, and Bede worked tirelessly. He ransacked all the archives to complete the history, because he worked tirelessly to compile the history, and as especially the ecclesiastical history or the religious history of the England. And this is really a work of timeless importance, and and a very significant and comprehensive importance and comprehensive work on the history. The next writer is Caedmon or Caedmon. The time period is around 7th century. His biographical details is shrouded in nebula, because there is a certain reason which is arguably valid in today's time. At that time, writing was not prevalent, and the printing press was not there, and the knowledge and the dissemination of the literariness and the dissemination of what we call literacy was not as much as we have today, and that is why the information about the writers and their works is very scanty and is very less available to us. uh, Remember this, the question may be asked in net examination or in any other examination pertaining to the same strata. He is called Milton of Anglo Saxon age, and he learned art of poesy from angel, not from man. Now let me tell you a story which is related to Caedmon. Basically, Caedmon, he was a very he was servant there in a monastery. Uh, and in the monastery there was a stable, and he was there to tend the horses. Wherever there was festivity, or wherever there was marriages or any function, and people used to humiliate him, asking him to sing something for them. Knowing the reason that he is quite unacquainted with the art of singing or with the art of composing verses, people used to humiliate him, people used to disgrace him because of his ignorance. One night he was sleeping there in on the bed in his stable. An angel comes to him, and he asks him to sing something. He says that I'm unable to sing. How can I sing? I'm quite illiterate. And the angel says, I say sing something. He reiterates and asks him, how can I sing and what should I sing? The angel replied to him that sing the creation of the thing and the creator. And this is the divine inspiration which inspired him to write splendid and peerless poetry. And his extant work is hymn that is called Paraphrases. The work enumerates the story of Genesis from deluge to Exodus. Deluge is a term which is used in Bible and both in Bible and Quran for the great flood of Noah in Bible, or in Arabic we call him Nuh alayhi salam, Prophet Nuh. And the Exodus of the Jews from the city of Jerusalem and from the Palestine. And the work is a splendid piece of imagination blended with insight and emotion. This the imagination and the loftiness of the idea is really commendable and peerless in this poem. The next writer is Cynewulf, or some people pronounce it Cynewulf, but the common and the prevalent pronunciation is Cynewulf, and the time period is 8th century. Uh, much is not known about him or about his biography, but his name came into limelight around 1840 when his works were translated by the scholars, and the works were recovered from the different sources. He is the one very important thing that a literature student must bear in his mind if he really wants to enjoy literature, and if he really wants to assimilate the knowledge about the literature and the very facts, interesting facts. uh, he is the only writer who signed his work, which justifies or which vindicates that he is the real author of that particular work. Prior to him, we have conjectures because we have paraphrases, we have ecclesiastical history of English people, but and there is always a space for controversy. There is always a space for guess and conjecture whether these works were written by that particular author to whom it is ascribed or not. But here, in case of Cynewulf, he is the first writer of English literature who started signing his own work, and his work he wrote in Latin and in English. The first poem is The Christ. It is a didactic poem. A didactic poem is a poem which is written with a moral purpose to teach some sort of morality or religiosity to the people. And the theme of the poem is nativity, ascension, and doomsday. Nativity, basically, nativity stands for the birth of Jesus Christ, and the first theme of the poem is nativity because it deals with the birth of the Jesus Christ. Ascension is a term which is used for the no, for the lifting of Jesus Christ when few people were about to hang him, and the doomsday is a term which is used for the day of the resurrection or for the judgment day. Juliana is another poem. Detail is not known what sort of theme does it contain, and the fate of apostles. These three poems have been signed by the author, and remember it, Alina is the poem which remained unsigned, and this may be ascribed to some other writers if researchers try to find its authorship. Now let us discuss one of the most important writer and one of the most important ruler of the Anglo Saxon period. He is Alfred the Great, and he was born in 1848 and died in 1901. With the advent of Alfred, our prose literature emanated. He, if we call him father of English prose, and this would not be out of place. He became king of Wessex because of the Treaty of Wedmore, because Wessex was the most heptarchy was there, and there were seven provinces ruled by seven different tribes, and Wessex was the tribe which was ruled by the King Alfred, and after the Treaty of Wedmore, King Alfred became the King of Wessex. He was the most powerful, he was the most dominant character in both in war and in the field of education and intellectual productivity. What he did with the sword to save the grace of his nation, same he did with the pen to educate his people. Basically, he is he is a very illustrious character of English literature who not only introduced prose, he also introduced prose and the books of foreign authors into and got them translated into native tongue so that those books could be easily accessible and ascertainable to the native people. He is civilized his barbaric community. His cultural role is indispensable, and invariably and unequivocally he was a cultured man who brought culture to the barbaric and savage British people who knew just wars and feuds, and then fighting with each other, and then colonizing and subjugating, and then losing and winning. but it was quite a difficult task for him to educate them and to educate them morally, and to teach them morality and civilize them. But he taught them civility. He is credited to have instituted first navy of the world. He is the man who is credited to have instituted first navy. Navy is a force which usually takes care of the uh, aqua boundary, or the water boundary, or the water territory of a particular country. He gave law in the form of 10 commandments, because before the time of Alfred there was lawlessness in the country, but it is the time of the Alfred who gave 10 commandments, or you can call them fundamental rights to the people of the Britain. He established courts and administered justice, because he is credited to have established courts and administered justice to the people, because before that there was savagery and there was barbaric people. There were barbaric people who were quite away from the civility, quite away from the civilized world, who believed in fighting, quarrel and scuffles and all. He gave them 10 commandments, and according to those 10 commandments are the fundamental rights. In his courts, justice was delivered to the people. And one of the biggest and the commendable feat of Alfred is to impart education in the native tongue, which was in Latin erstwhile. Uh, Before the advent of Alfred the Great, uh, basically Latin was the language of the Britain, but elite section used to read and write in Latin, but the people belonging to the lower section of the society, they were unable to understand, they were unable to speak about, and they were unable to continue with the Latin as a medium of instruction. So he is the man who God translated most important books, and started educating his people in his native tongue. It is said that every minor scholar who did even a petty contribution for the enhancement of literature was encouraged and was speedily set to work for pedagogy. Each and every, even a little and even a petty contribution towards the learning was rewarded very highly by the Alfred, which infused a new vigor and new spirit into the people to get involved into learning and enhance the learning, and consequently this learning will get them a good position in the court of the Alfred, and their financial state will be transformed, and then they'll be involved into learning. People thronged to his court because of his literary patronage. As I told you in just that it was because of his love for literature and love for learning that people were thronged and people were flocked towards his court, because of his generous nature towards learning. This conducive ambience urged a huge number of scholars and provided a vast impetus. He translated works from Latin to English. And now let us discuss the most important translations which were either done by and translated by Alfred himself, or got translated by himself by various scholars. Orosius' Universal History and Geography. This is the second compendious book of the history after Bede's history. We just studied that Bede's history, Ecclesiastical History of England, which is the first history of the English people and their religion, and Orosius' Universal History and Geography. The book was in Latin, and Alfred translated it into native tongue English and made it accessible to the native people, so that they may be able to get maximum benefit out of this book, because now the book is available in their native tongue, which is ascertainable, which is tangible to them as well. Pope Gregory's Gregory or Gregory, you can call it, Pope Gregory's shuffled book. This is a this is primarily meant for clergy, and the book was translated by Alfred, and the book is meant for the clergy, and about the various papal and the church practices as well. Boethius' Consolation of Philosophy. The book encapsulates the philosophical works of Middle Ages, and this is also an enhancement to the philosophy and introduction to the introduction of philosophy to the native people in their native tongue. The Saxon Chronicle, English or Saxon Chronicle. This is most important and valuable translation, and this is the record of the birth and death in the West Saxon kingdom. Alfred enlarged the record beginning from Caesar's conquest. All these translations were West Saxon dialect, because uh, before the final form of the English as we have today, there used to be many dialects, and West Saxon in the West Saxon dialect, Alfred translated this this chronicle, which records the you can call census register in modern times. Now let us discuss about our maiden poem, Beowulf, about the various facts about the meter, about the language, about the imagery that has been used are employed in this poem. Beowulf, as I told in the introduction, that this is the earliest and the greatest epic of English literature. It is an epic or a heroic poem. Epic poem is a poem in which there is a war between good and evil. There are various characters, and it is narrative, and there is a war between good and evil, and a struggle between good and evil, and in order to eradicate and annihilate evil, good also suffers, and sometimes goods also get perished. It records the heroic deed of a hero. Epic. The authorship of maiden poem in English literature is unknown. I told you the nature of the poem is anonymous, because the poem hasn't been signed by anyone, and even the researchers or researchers have failed to ascribe its authorship to anyone. Some people call it that the work was written by Cynewulf. Some people call it the work was written by Bede, but these are just conjectures, and these are just the matter of controversies. However, nothing more than that. The poem is the first speech on the British soil, and this is the realistic portrayal of the then society, cultural, vocation, lifestyle, habits, and adventure. We know that literature is the mirror of the society, and it is the written record of the races. Behind every book is a man, and behind every man is a race. And when we recount this, this becomes literature. So, the poem depicts each and every tidbit of the then culture, society, lifestyle, and habits of the people. Now let us discuss about let us discuss very precisely and very comprehensively few significant points about the Beowulf, the important information. Uh, it is the first poem of a literature. It paved the way for the successor, and it recounts the struggle of early settlers on the British soil, and the poem is allegorical in nature. An allegorical poem is a poem in which the abstract ideas are personified, and in the form of characters to teach some lesson, and where they contain more than one meaning. And one of the biggest allegory of the world is we can say Dante's this Divina Commedia, or the Divine Comedy in English. And then we have Pilgrim's Progress, and then we have this Fairy Queen in English, so on and so forth. In modern times, allegory, we have this Animal Farm by this George Orwell. This is the sublimity of the alliterative verse. The poem has been written in alliterative verse because English was not refined at the time. It was in its earliest stage. The poem has been written in alliterative verse because there was no concept of a formal rhyme or the meter scheme. And the alliterative verse is a verse in which there is repetition of consonant sounds at the beginning of the word. And the poem is partially done. The setting of the poem is partially Denmark and Geatland. It simply means that the poem where the action takes place is partially in Denmark and in Geatland. Now, the second poem is Vidsid. The word Vidsid means wanderer. Wanderer means someone who roams here and there, someone who swiftly moves around aimlessly. The poem is also anonymous because its authorship is unknown, and the story of the wandering gleeman around the world, and the poem contains several references to the Beowulf and all. And the other poem is Deor Lament. The poem recounts the suffering of the hero. It is anonymous, and the tone of the poem is nearly elegiac. Uh, the third poem is the Seafarer. It is also anonymous, and it is an adventure story. An adventure story is a story which recounts the struggle of the hero for his survival. And the poem is allegorical. I have defined what is allegorical poem, and the poem is in two parts. It is a sea story. Sea story is a story which is related to the struggle in the sea, or which is related to the struggle in the water for the survival. Now let us discuss the significant and the salient feature of the literature of the age, and you people have to remember it because if you are writing an examination, you get direct question: what are the salient features, are the significant features of the literature of the Anglo-Saxon period? Love of personal freedom. Uh, this is one of the most important thematic concern of the literature of Anglo-Saxon period, where everybody, and in each and every poem, there is a longing, there is a yearning of the hero for the personal freedom and to get freedom to his people. Adventure and romance and unquenchable thirst of the sea roving etc. This can also be categorized in the personal in the category of the personal freedom. And the romance, this romance is not the romance between the girlfriend and the boyfriend. This romance is a genre in literature which involves a journey, because those people believe in faring from one place to another, errands and voyages and journeys, and that is why the romance and the adventure element is there. The theme of the war is the most dominant, as because it was a struggle for the survival with the natural forces, with the other forces, with the tribes, with the clans, and that is why the war was always there at the center of their literature. The language at its emerging stage, so there was no proper meter and rhyme. I have discussed that alliterative meter was prevalent at the time, nothing more than that. There is no didactic element. Didactic element is that where a writer wants to teach you some morality, wants to civilize you, wants to teach you something about the moral laxity, and wants to better and embolden your moral character, your civic character, your cultural character. But such sort of element is no more there in the poetry of the period. The literature is mostly oral, because oral literature is a literature which is not written, which is in the form of oral, and the literature begin in the oral form, because this writing and the discovery of the paper, and then this ink, this all happened during the fourth and 5th century. So the literature was oral because people used to sing, people used to come and sit, people used to fight for the survival, and then sea roving and all. And after doing all that, and after their very stringent and strident struggle with the natural forces, once they get back to their caves, and they used to burn the fire and sit around, and then Scoop or the troubadour used to recount or the reckon them the story of the valor and the chivalry. And that is why the literature is oral. Anonymous literature, I have told that most of the works, and the bulk of the works are written during this period are anonymous. Their authorship is not known, except the three poems written by Cynewulf. Obsolete and archaic, because the language was not in refined form, and the most of the parchments or the pieces of the extant writing were written in the dialects of the different tribes, and were written in the dialects of the different areas and the provinces, and that is why the vocabulary used there is obsolete and archaic. Even a modern reader won't be able to peruse or read any piece of the writing of that time without the assistance of a dictionary. Uh, Dream vision as a literary technique, one of the most important and the significant device which was used during that period to write was dream vision. Now let me explain you what is dream vision. Dream vision is basically to sit to sit sorry, dream vision is basically a writer pretends to have fallen asleep, and then he sees some vision, and then he recounts those visions, and jot them down, and composes a poem or a narrative poem or a ballad, etc. Because the reason is very clear. The reason is very clear. Uh, in order to escape the punishment from the rain from the authorities, he used to pretend that he has seen such things in the dream. Influence of Christianity and the two school of the poetry. Advent of Christianity was around 2nd century, and it heralded two primary benefits to the country: a huge pelf of new language, because English was introduced, and the scoop, that is a tribe poet, was replaced by literary monk. Now earlier on there used to be scoop of the tribes who used to tell stories. Now it was replaced by literary monk, and the scoop would tell the stories of the bravery and the gallantry, etc. Uh, Two great schools of the poetry. The advent of the Christianity ended the feuds among tribes and establishing two school, Augustan school. It was established, the school was established under the patronage of Saint Augustine, who arrived from Rome. He arrived from the Rome, and the school was established. It exercised a huge influence, resulted in education of common masses. And the school is the Roman school. This Augustan school was established, and it educated the masses, and imparted the knowledge to the masses. Now, but this could not yield widespread consequences, and it remained confined to the kingdom of the Essex. But one pitfall of this school was that it was confined to a particular area, that is Essex. That is why it could not exercise very huge influence. And the Northumbrian school, the school was established under the leadership of Aidan. Aidan was a monk who came from the Ireland, and he established this school. And the monk of this school chiefly tried to educate masses in Northumbria. The school was situated in Northumbria, and they tried to educate masses living in that area. And the chief center were monasteries and abbeys. Basically, the centers of teaching or imparting knowledge, inculcating knowledge were monasteries and abbeys. Bede, Caedmon, and Cynewulf belonged to this school. Causes of the decline of this literature: the same zeal and the same vigor that caused upsurge of the literature proved disastrous and devastating for the literature. The Danes shattered their power by trouncing them, because they attacked them and they snatched powers from them. The administration was very frail, and the feuds led them to their disaster, because they were involved in feuds and wars among the tribes and the clans. That is why they could not resist the external aggression. They could not resist that, and this led to that disaster. And the last great Saxon king was William the Confessor, who ruled till Norman conquest. And Norman conquest happened in 1066, and from there our Anglo-Norman period begins. Dear listeners and viewers, how did you feel after listening this video? Don't forget to subscribe my channel, and press the bell icon, and keep on sharing this video, so that I may be able to impart what a bit of knowledge I possess, so that I may be able to impart it to you people. And please keep on sharing your valuable suggestions in the comment section. And I'll also give the link in the description section to you can read this information on my blog section, in my blog section. So subscribe my channel, and keep on suggesting me and the suggestion to better it. Thank you so much for giving your valuable time. Have a nice time ahead, and God bless you all. Thank you.